Hey everybody, and welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome to this channel. I'm David Townsend. This is the Net Academy, where we are learning networks together. And on this video, what I'm going to be going through is something that's commonly called RBAC or RBAC, which stands for Role-Based Access Control. And this is very, very important for any network, for data centers, for enterprises, for cloud, etc., etc. Because what RBAC, Role-Based Access Control, ensures is that authorized users who have authorized with some kind of password, etc., only have access to a level of operations that they should have access to, and absolutely no more. Now let's put that into English. What does that mean? So if you look at it from a first helpline desk point of view, a customer end user raises a ticket, they've got a problem on the network, they get through to that first point of contact. You want that first helpline, that first point of contact, to maybe to do things like pinging the IP address of that person who's launching that ticket. Or maybe you want them to view statistics on the interface, ensure packets are going in, packets are going out. But maybe you don't want them to be able to configure the routing. Maybe you don't want them to be able to view the security or firewall policies, etc., etc. And obviously from this, you're given a level of access for authorized users to do what they should be able to do and no more. And obviously that's ensuring a certain level of network integrity. Now, obviously you can have different levels of RBAC. You've typically got things like super user that can absolutely do anything, can configure, can view, can roll back in the Junos world. And then you've got things like operator that can configure some parts of the switch of the router, but typically not everything, and can view statistics. And then you've got other operations, other RBAC profiles, such as, like I said, the first helpline desk, where viewing, pinging, trace routing is possible, but nothing other than that. And that is why role-based access control is so important, is because it's ensuring that users, authorized users, only have access, as I said, to what they should have access to and should be able to do, and absolutely no more than that. Now, a typical question I'm going to get from this is, David, why are you doing this? Because from a UI, from a user interface on all these web portals, regardless of solution, aren't there already profiles already configured? Well, the answer to that is yes, of course. But what if you want your own custom profile, your own custom RBAC profile with really granular details? Then depending on the solution, that might not actually be there. And actually, depending on the solution, you might not be able to do that in the first place. And that's why I'm doing this video, so that from a Junos perspective, from a command line interface perspective, the information is there and you understand how to configure RBAC on Juniper devices. But enough of me talking, let's actually go straight into the lab, show you the lab, and then let's start configuring those user profiles and those classes, which are really essential for those user profiles. So I'll see you there. So here's the lab that we're going to be using for this video. And as you can see, there's really not much to it, but if we actually take it from an architectural, a topology perspective and build up from there. So what you can see right at the top is there is a RADIUS server. And that's important because typically they're still used in networks today, where you've got switches and routers, etc., querying those RADIUS servers for a particular user who's trying to get access to a particular resource. And that RADIUS server will return an attribute of some sort saying, yep, they are or are not allowed, and this is what they have access to. And then right here below this is actually one device. This is our VMX, our virtual MX router. Now right here on this device is where we're actually going to be building, configuring, creating those user profiles and those classes. I'll come on to that in just a second. And below that here you've got a VEX switch, a virtual EX switch. This really isn't doing much other than trunking the native VLAN up to, over this link, up to the MX router and providing access interfaces to these 4 different hosts. Now there's actually 4 different hosts, as you can see, and really you don't need to worry about this green part here. That's really just for my information. But if you are curious about it, this device here has got this IP address of 192.168.10.10. 192.168.10.24. The gateway is right here with a 192.168.10.1 for the layer 3 access. Host 2, the super user, has got 10.11. The ops has 192.168.10.12. And the view only has 192.168.10.13. All in the native VLAN and all have this gateway of 192.168.10.1. So this is a good old-fashioned router on a stick model, isn't it? Where you've got that switch providing connectivity, access to all different users, and then trunks everything up to a router where there's that layer 3 boundary. But really what you want to be concerned with and looking at for each one of these users, for the network operations center, for the super user, for the ops team, and for the view only users like the help desk, is really these parts in blue here that I'm just highlighting for you. And what you can see, just for example, for the NOC team, is that they have allowed access Monday to Friday between these particular times only. Also that they cannot run the clear, configure, edit or start shell commands, but they are absolutely allowed everything else. So that is a type of class. I'll come on to that in just a second. But then we've also got super user, which has access all the time, every hour, every day, so 24/7, 365 days a year, and they have absolutely access to all commands and configuration mode, and they have 0 restrictions. Whereas if you look at it over here from the view only, they have access 24/7, 365 days a year, but they cannot run any configuration commands. That's basically what I was talking about at the beginning, but they can view only statistics and the configuration. So they can view the configuration of the device, but they can't actually change the configuration. They can't amend the configuration. They can't add to the configuration. They can't delete any parts of the configuration. And for the ops team, you get the idea. They've got access at this particular time and day. They can execute ping and traceroute commands, and they can even run show commands on particular interfaces. So here are 4 different flavors, 4 different types of classes. What is a class? Well, first, a class is where you define what that class of people, those class of users have access to, what they can do and what they cannot do. So for example, you may say that they can have access to the configure mode and can do configuration on that Juniper MX router, but they can't do things like Telnet, that they can't Telnet into the MX router and do the configuration over Telnet. So that is essentially what a class is. And once you've defined your class, what you can then do is actually define the users. So that would be the NOC, that would be the ops team, etc., etc. And you assign those users to a particular class. So really the first point of call is to actually configure the class, and then the second point of call is to actually create and configure those users. So class is just really a set of attributes, a set of configuration of what can be done and what cannot be done, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And then you build and create those users with that authentication to say either that password or encrypted password or none maybe, and there's other variations as well. And you define what class they are actually aligned to. And right at the top here, you could just see some other little exercises that we're going to go through. Now, I did say Telnet and SSH, so right at the end, when we've configured all of these classes for the NOC, for the super user, for the ops team, and for the view only, and we've created those users and committed that configuration, is that they're actually going to SSH. We're going to SSH or Telnet in from these devices through the EX switch and all the way up to the MX router. But typically what you also want to do is limit the amount of Telnet and SSH connections, because you don't want the MX router to maybe, or VX switch, whatever, SOX device, to have too many ongoing Telnet connections and too many in the same time period. Also, maybe you actually want to define an order of authentication for these users. So maybe you want them to authenticate to the RADIUS service first, and if RADIUS isn't available, maybe then you want them to to authenticate to a locally configured and saved password on the MX router. So that's going to be another little exercise that we're going to do. And obviously, to actually query this RADIUS server at the top here, we need to define what the IP address is of that radius server, and you can see it's 10.10.10.1. Obviously only with 3 retries, so if a user fails their authentication, you can try it again and again, but on the 3rd time if they fail, then the connection is dropped and we've a 10-second timeout period. And finally, we're going to create a group where if a user hasn't been active for 5 minutes, hasn't done anything, it's just going to time out and the connection will automatically drop. So yeah, it's pretty standard known stuff this that you'd do on any network, but it's still very important nonetheless. But this is the lab, this is the configuration we're going to go through, and everything is once again done on this VMX router here. So first let's actually start off with configuring, just for example, the super user down here, because as you could see, they have access to anything and everything 24/7, 365 days a year with no restrictions, and we'll build up from there. So let's start with the configuration, and remember, every configuration, every syntax that we're entering in is going to be on the VMX or on the router itself. What we're going to do first is we're going to configure the super user, simply because it's the most straightforward. Super user just basically has access to anything and everything with 0 restrictions. So what I'll do is I'm just going to zoom into all of this here just so you can see it a little better. So I'm now in the command line interface on the router, on the VMX router, and of course let's go into the command line interface into configure mode. But where do you actually configure or create those users and the classes? You do so by moving into the edit system login. So this is where you create, configure those classes and the users. And if I do a quick show, you can see that there's nothing here. So we want to create that super user. Now for me, I always create the class first, because if you create the class, you can then create the user and assign them that class. If you create the user first, you can't then define the class. So you need the class in place to actually assign it to the user, if that makes sense. I don't think I explained that too well. But let's go into set, and if I hit question mark, you can see right here, set class, login class. So let's say set class, I'm going to call this super user. And now if we hit question mark, you can actually see, and let me extend this a bit, you can actually see that there's quite a lot that you can do. So you could say, what time do you want the access to end? What time do you want it to start in hours and minutes, in 24-hour clocking? You can also define the allowed days. You can also define the command line interface. You could define, I don't know what this is, but breadcrumbs. That's pretty interesting. Sounds like something out of a story tale, but I need to look into that. You can say what commands you want to deny, and you could do so using regular expressions as well. You could deny configuration, you could deny the configuration using regular expressions, idle, timeout, login tips, login scripts, login alarms. That's when a user logs in, they're going to get an alarm, if there is any, actually presented to them, what permissions they actually have, so on and so forth. You can see that there's actually a lot here. But what we want to do is define that they are allowed access for all week, for all hours, and they have access to everything, including the configuration mode with no restrictions. So to do that, we do permissions and then hit question mark, because this is saying this is what you are permitted to do. And now you could say what that class is permitted to do. So if I select all, that means that the super user has access to everything you see here. So they can configure the firewall or edit the firewall, they can do flow tap, they could do network, so they can access the network. That's things like ping, trace route, and a lot more. They can roll back, they can reset, they can view, they could do trace options, basically everything. And this is exactly what we want the super user to actually have. So I'm going to do all, and then we can actually say set class, hit question mark, and I forgot super user, question mark, and I want to say what are the allowed days. Now you don't have to do this, because with doing so, or if you don't enter this in, Junos is just going to assume that this user has access for any time, any day. So if you define allowed days and do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then Junos is not going to allow access to that user on Saturday and Sundays. So I don't really have to do this here, to be honest, because it's for all week, for all hours. But just to show you the syntax, let's do allowed days and hit question mark. And what you could do is just do square bracket. And remember, it's lowercase. If you do uppercase, so uppercase Monday, lowercase Tuesday for that beginning letter, Junos isn't going to accept that because you can actually see on the left hand side everything is lowercase. So I'm just going to write all of this out: Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and close it off. And now if I do show, you can see that we've created our class super user, allowed days for every day of the week. Didn't really have to do that, but they are permitted to do everything with no restrictions. Super user. But now we've created the user because we've created the class. So let's do set user super user. And I'm just going to give it the same name just to keep things consistent and easy to understand. And now we define what is the class, hit question mark, and now you can see here's the class that I just created, super user, and there's some default ones here as well. Oh, there's actually a super user already, but hey, that's good practice, isn't it? And you can actually see that, funny enough, the permissions are actually all there. So let's do super user. If I hit question mark, we can now also say what is the authentication. So let's give the authentication and hit question mark. As I was saying before, you can load a key, you can do encrypted password, plain text password, hit return. I'm just going to enter in Juniper, very strong password, I know, Juniper again. And now if I do show, we have now created, yes, our class and our user, super user, which is using the class super user, and we've authenticated this using an encrypted password. I'm pretty sure I've done plain text password there, so I'm just going to do that again. It's free software at the end of the day, so I can't really complain. Set user, super user, authentication, plain text password, Juniper. Let's do a show again. Okay, that is interesting because it's still showing encrypted password here, but maybe that's a bit of a bug, that's okay. But let's do a commit on this. Now for us to test this at this point, i.e. for super user to Telnet or SSH into the VMX router, we have to allow that service. So if I scroll up, you can actually see at the top here that we need Telnet and SSH, but we want to limit these to maximum of 4 in a 10-minute window, and we need radius with a particular timeout, and we want to do authentication in a particular order. So let's do all of that now, because even with this user and class created, if you don't have Telnet and SSH actually enabled, it's never going to work. So let's go on to, or back onto the router. And I'm just going to hit up and to set that configuration order of radius first and then local password, it's simply set authentication order. Open it up in square brackets. Let's do radius and password. Close the bracket. And now I want to define the radius server. Hit question mark. Hit enter in the IP address, which is 10.10.10.1. And it also needs to have 3 retries and a 10-second timeout. So if I hit question mark, you can see here's the retry here and also the timeout. So let's do retry. God, my spelling is awful today. Retry and timeout 10. Let's do a quick show. Or let's do show radius actually. And you've seen it's needing a particular secret. So let's just do that now. Set radius server 10 and I need to enter in the secret. And I'm just going to do Juniper and now do show radius once again. That should have cleared that error. And there we go. So we've got the secret to authenticate to the radius server with this IP address, timeout of 10 seconds with 3 particular retries. But you can also see that we need Telnet and SSH. So we configure those in the system services. Now if I do show, I've already got SSH enabled. That's how I'm able to use a secure CRT. But if I do set SSH and hit question mark, what we actually want to use is the connection limit here, which limits the number of simultaneous connections. So in that case, that's going to be 4. We don't want to have any more than 4 simultaneous SSH connections, as well as the rate limit. Limit the number of connections per minute. So let's do set connection limit is 4 with the rate limit of 10. And now if I do show, we've now configured our SSH, and I need to do the same for Telnet. So let's do Telnet, connection limit 4, rate limit 10, and do show, and that's it. I've now configured my SSH and Telnet, and they will be enabled once I hit commit. And I'll come back to the timeout of 5 users at the end when we've got all the users actually created. But coming back to the super user, if I actually go onto the super users terminal and do a quick ping, so let's go into command line interface and ping 192.168. You can already see it worked up above, and you can see it's got connectivity. Now if I try and do Telnet 192.168.10.1, then this should work. So it's now asking me for the login, so I'm going to do super user, password juniper, and there we are. I've now telnetted into the VMX router, and I should be able to even go into configure mode. You can see, yep, I can, and I can do edit system, and I can see everything I've just been configuring on that VMX router. So that's it. That is creating a class and then creating the user and mapping or aligning that user to use that particular class. Let's do the same now for the Network Operations Center, the NOC. But first, let's just close the command line interface on the super user, and I'm just going to quit once again, and there we go. It's out of the Telnet. Let's go back to router 1, and now, of course, we need to create a new class. But you can see that this has access Monday to Friday only, from 8:30 in the morning to 5:30 at night, and it cannot run the clear, configure, edit, or start shell commands. So that's a deny, but it's allowed everything else. So how can we do that? Let's first go up and into edit login. So let's first do the class. So let's do set class NOC, and we're going to do permissions all because they allowed everything. We'll come around to those clear commands, etc. in just a minute's time. But I also want to set the class of NOC for the allowed days. Let's open this up in brackets. Don't forget it's lowercase: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let's close that off. And I also want to now define the allowed times, a question mark. So it's access start and access end. Access start 08:30. Can I do it in one line? Access end 17:30. Let's do a quick show on that. And here you can see we've already configured now the allowed days, access start, access finishing with permissions all. Let's actually make this a bit easier for myself. It's just go into the edit class NOC. And now we need to set those deny commands for the clear, configure, edit, and start shell. I had to look at it there. How do we actually do this? Well, first what you do is you enter not square brackets, the open commas, whatever they're called. You know what I mean, the speech marks, and then curly bracket. And you need to do this for each one. So first I'm going to do clear, and then close off with that curly bracket. And then what you need is a pipe, because the pipe acts like an OR. So what we're saying here is clear or configure, close that off, or open up curly bracket, edit, close it off, and finally start shell, close it off, and then close it off with those quotation marks, whatever they're called. I don't actually know. But if I now just enter that in and do a show, you can now see we've actually configured the NOC. So I appreciate this isn't realistic. By the way, a network operations center is going to have access 24/7, 365 days a year, I know, for all times, but this is just a lab. It's just practice. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, from this time, start from this time to this time, they have permission to do everything except clearing statistics, going into configure mode, editing specific areas, and even doing a start the shell. Now if I hit up, we need to create that user. So I'm going to do set user, NOC, class, NOC, authentication, plain text password, hit enter. I'm going to do the same command, juniper, and if I do commit on this, and that succeeded. And I've just noticed right here there's actually a spelling mistake, isn't there? So that's not correct. I've done a spelling mistake there. So we need to amend that. So let's just do that quickly. Let's actually just do set class NOC deny commands, clear, configure. Let's make sure I spell it right. Edit and start shell. Let's just do a quick shell class knock on this. And you can see it's now got the right spelling. I'm a bit conscious of that now. Let's just do a quick recommit on that. So now let's move on to the ops side where you can do the allowed access for all week for all hours. I'm not going to do that. You get the command by now. It's very easy to do. But Junos will just allow for all week for all hours. If you don't define a specific start and finish time and specific days, it's just going to allow for 24/7, 365. But here you can also see it's running execute, ping and traceroute commands, and even running shell commands on interfaces. So I've quickly just gone into edit system logging class ops. It's just already created the ops, but there's absolutely nothing here, which is obviously what we're going to change right now. So first let's do the set permissions and hit question mark. Now the one that we actually want to do here is actually network, so they can access the network. What does this actually mean though? So here's a document that you can get offline. I'll put it into the comments box, user access privileges. And if I scroll down, you've got all the permission flags, everything that we just seen in Junos for access, for admin, all clear, configure. But right down a little bit further is the network. Can access the network by using the ping, SSH, Telnet and traceroute commands. And if I go into this, actually select this link here, you can see it says all the capabilities, and you can see there's quite a lot that the user can do for ping, traceroute, as well as SSH and Telnet. Now coming back to it, we only want to allow ping and traceroute, which means we want to deny SSH and Telnet for this particular user. So we're going to do set permissions network, but now we need to deny or set deny commands for, and open up curly brackets, Telnet, pipe, SSH, close it off. And if I do a quick show, we can now say that the user could do everything within the network, which was quite a lot, except Telnet and SSH. But we also need to allow them to run shell commands on all interfaces. So how can we do that? Let's do set, allow commands, show interfaces. And now I'm just going to do a wildcard here for all interfaces and do a quick show. This is basically the configuration. We're saying the user, the ops, can do anything within the network for ping and traceroute only, but they cannot do Telnet and SSH within this network flag. But they can also run the show interfaces command on any, hence the wildcard, on any interface. And now if I just do up, we of course need to set or create the user. So let's do set user ops class ops authentication plain text password juniper, as always juniper. And now if I do a show user ops, we could see the user class of operations with authentication as juniper. I don't know why it keeps doing encrypted password. It's just one of these quirks with this free software. And if I do show class ops, you can see everything we've just created here. Now if I just do a quick commit on this, and to test this, let's actually just go onto the ops terminal here, and let's just do a quick ping 192.168.10.1, and we got 64 bytes. Yeah, that's great. And now let's quit out of this and telnet 192.168.10.1, and we can get into there, which is great. Let's do ops password juniper. And we're now on there, and I should be able to do show interfaces. Let's see if I could do terse. Yeah, I can do that. But can I go into configure mode? No, and you can see it's not even letting me do that. Can I do an SSH? Well, that's not actually going to work. There's nothing to SSH into from here, but that user ops user shouldn't be allowed at this point. And finally, it's now configure the view only. So here we are, last but certainly not least, let's now configure the class for the view only. So let's do edit class, and I'm just going to do VO for view only, just to keep it short. And now let's do set permissions, because we need to permit the user to do view only on statistics and the configuration. That is a permission. And if I hit question mark right at the bottom, you can see view here, which can view the current values and statistics. and can also view the configuration. Now we need to do both of those, so I'm going to see if this works. Let's do view and view configuration. I don't know if this is going to work, but we will see. Let's do show. Seems to have accepted it, but we also need to say that they cannot run the configure command. So we need to do deny or set. Don't forget the set commands, very important. And let's just open this up, configure. Let's do a show on this. And you can now see we've said that they can view and view configuration only, and we're denying them to go into configure mode. And I'm not going to do the allowed access for all week for all hours, because without this actually set, it's just going to do it anyway. But again, that would be set access start, set access end, and set allowed days. Very straightforward, very easy to actually do. But we've just created our VO, our view only class. So let me go up, and it's now create the user view only, which goes to the class view only. Authentication, plain text password, even though it's going to enter it in as encrypted password. Juniper, let's do commit, and I'm going to quit out of this because actually I'm not going to commit yet. There's actually one more command that we need to do. And with that succeeded, let me try the secure CRT on this guy here, view only. So let's go into secure CRT, let's ping, make sure we've got connectivity, and we do. Quit out of here. Let's telnet into 192.168.10.1, which is the router. Let's do view only, Juniper, very strong password. Can I go into configure mode? And you can see it cannot, which is absolutely great. But can I view statistics? So let's just do show interface, hit question mark, and I just want to view statistics, just for example, show statistics, and yeah, we absolutely can. But there's one more thing that we need to actually configure, because we've created the class and user for this, and the class and user for this, and the class and user for this one, and that one. For all four of them are basically created. But there's one final part, and that is set the timeout for all users of 5 minutes. This is important. So if they're inactive, they've not done anything, then that Telnet or SSH connection will just drop. It will just drop for all users. So coming back onto the secure CRT, what you could have done, what we could have done, what I could have done is just, for example, set the class, just for example, view only, time, and it's not under the user as well. So what was it? I'm sure it's under the class. There, here you go. I thought it was timeout. It's idle timeout. So you could have done this per user. So set class VO, set class ops, knock, super user, idle timeout, and then set it to 5 minutes. That's one way, of course, doing it. But if you've got X amount of classes, a high number of classes, then that could, not be very scalable. There is a better way to actually do it. And if I go right to the top and edit groups, then what I could do is set the name. So first we need to do the idle timeout. So I'm just going to call it idle timeout. For the system login class, and I'm just going to do an asterisk here. Now it's asking you for a particular name, but what you can do is this. You could do da 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 da. It's not too hard. Not too sure how to call that there, but the asterisk, the wildcard in the middle of those less than and greater than signs. Then we could do the idle timeout of 5 minutes. Let's do a quick show. You can now see we've created this group for the system login for any class idle timeout. Now if we go back to the top and edit system login, now we can do set apply groups, hit question mark, and now I'm just going to call it idle timeout. Let's do a quick show, and you can see right at the top apply groups idle timeout, and that will basically allow all users that are assigned to any group, for all groups, to have an idle timeout of 5 minutes. So 2 ways to do it there. I quite like the latter way. So it's just covering all classes with that particular command, and they're all going to have that same idle timeout. So there we go, everybody. That is the end of this video. That is the end of how to create and configure, build role-based access control on Juniper devices. Now the syntax should be the same regardless whether it be a VMX router
or an EX switch or an SOX device or a QFX switch or a PTX router, etc., etc. I believe that they're all going to be the same, but of course, as always, check documentation. But as you can see, what I like to do is create the class first, define all those permissions and the deny commands and the allowed access days and access start and access end and the allowed days and all the variations therein. And then when you've created the class, build or create that user, assign them to that class you've just created, assign them with a particular authentication, maybe a bit more details if needed, and then that's it. Obviously testing it is obviously something additional on top of it. But I hope you found that useful, hope you found that informative. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Best way to support my channel. Any questions or comments, let me know down in the comments box. I love hearing from you all. Other than that, thanks for watching and goodbye.